The door wasn't fully closed. That's how it started. A sliver of an opening. No wider than a finger. But it was enough for the sound to creep out. I was in the kitchen, rinsing my coffee mug, the warm water running over my knuckles. It was late. The rest of the house was quiet except for the low hum of the HVAC unit kicking on. They were in her bedroom. Lucy and him. Mark. I could hear their voices. A low murmur at first. Then his question. Clear and sharp. Your mom still lives with you? A pause. In that silence, I could feel the air in the house shift. I could feel my daughter searching for the right words. The careful, curated words she'd started using ever since he came into the picture. Then her voice. A near whisper. Laced with an apology I hadn't yet earned. For now. She's been a huge help. But, she's a little simple. She doesn't really fit the new life I'm trying to build. Simple. The word didn't sting. It shattered something inside me. It was a clean break. Like ice cracking under a sudden weight. I turned off the faucet. The silence rushing back in. Heavier this time. I looked at my hands. The skin wrinkled. The knuckles slightly swollen from a lifetime of work. Simple hands. They had scrubbed floors, packed lunches, and held her forehead when she was sick with fever. They had sewn the hem of her first interview suit because we couldn't afford a new one. They had signed the loan documents that put this very roof over her head after her divorce left her with nothing. Simple. I suppose they were. They knew how to give. But they had never learned how to take. That was 3 weeks ago. But the word still echoes in the small room they call my space. It's not really a room. It's more of a large closet next to the laundry room. Just big enough for a twin bed. A small nightstand. And a dresser I brought from my old apartment. The one I gave up to a renter so Lucy could have the extra income. Just until you get back on your feet. Sweetie. I'd said. But temporary things have a terrible habit of becoming permanent when you love someone too much. The constant, rhythmic thump of the washing machine is the soundtrack to my life now. The faint, clean smell of bleach and fabric softener is the air I breathe. It's the smell of being useful, but not present. My name is Helen. I'm 67 years old, and for the first time in my life, I'm beginning to understand what it means to be seen by myself. This story begins with a lie, a folded piece of paper, and a car ride that felt like a final journey. But the truth is, it started long before that. It started the day I learned to apologize for existing. I know some people are born to be invisible. They learn early on to ask for permission even to breathe. Maybe I was one of them. For decades, my purpose was singular Lucy. My daughter. My only child. The reason I woke up before dawn to catch 2 buses to a cleaning job. The reason I sold Tupperware on the weekends. The reason I ate leftovers so she could have new textbooks. I was her mother. Her father. Her entire support system. Her own father. He'd been a man of grand promises and quick exits. He swore he'd be back with the groceries and a pack of cigarettes. I was 2 months pregnant. He came back 2 years later to say he was living with someone else in a different state. But with Lucy, I always believed it would be different. I was everything to her. The port in her emotional storms. The applause in her empty auditoriums. When she divorced David. A messy, drawn-out affair that left her emotionally and financially broken. I was the one who showed up. Not with advice, but with a saucepan, a mattress, and my life savings. I packed up my quiet, paid-off apartment in the suburbs, the one I had worked 30 years to own, and put it up for rent. I moved into her newly mortgaged house in a trendy part of Charlotte, the house my name on the loan application had secured. It's just for a little while. Mom? She'd promised. Her eyes red from crying. Just until I get things sorted. In the beginning, it was good. We were a team again. We'd eat dinner together. Watch old movies on TV. I'd make her my chicken noodle soup on cold nights and leave little notes on her bathroom mirror. This too shall pass. You are stronger than you think. I love you, kiddo. She never replied to them, but I'd see them stay up for days. And I thought, that's her way. She's grieving the end of her marriage. She'll come back to herself. And she did come back. Just not to me. She came back different. More distant. The late nights at work started. The phone that was always angled away from me. The secret smile she'd have while texting. That's when I first heard of him. Mark. A real estate entrepreneur. She'd said. He was never properly introduced. He'd come over. But I was encouraged not to be around. Mom. Mark is just stopping by for a bit. Okay. Maybe you could just relax in your room for a while? We'll talk later. Later. It was always later. I started to notice how his presence created my absence. I wasn't jealous of her finding someone new. Lord knows. I wanted her to be happy. But every time he was near, I was made to disappear. And she let it happen. Disappearing became my designated place in the house. I became a ghost in the hallways of a home I was paying for. One evening, I overheard that conversation. The one about me being too simple. It was a stone hitting glass. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I sat on my narrow bed, staring at the textured ceiling, and I felt like a piece of old furniture. Useful once, but now outdated. A family heirloom nobody wants but feels too guilty to throw away. After that, the trip started. Weekend getaways to Asheville. Wine tastings in the mountains. Invitations that never included a +1 for me. And then came the big one. The trip to Myrtle Beach. I heard her on the phone with his mother. Her voice bright and cheerful. It's going to be wonderful. Just us. The family. A real intimate time. No distractions. A distraction. That's what I had become. The following week, she came to me with the idea. The special place. She approached me with that soft, practice voice. The one she used for a sales pitch. Mom, I want to take you somewhere special on Monday. You're going to love it. It's calm, comfortable, with people your own age. It's just for a few days. Swear. It'll be good for you. You need a break. The last time I'd heard that kind of promise was when my husband swore he'd be right back. I accepted. Because that's what mothers do. We have this thankless gift of believing. Even when we already know the answer. But deep down, I knew. I wasn't being taken for a rest. I was being taken to be erased. The Monday she chose was overcast. One of those gray, heavy Charlotte mornings where the clouds seem to promise a change, even if you don't know what it is. We got in her car. A sleek, new SUV that still smelled of leather and Mark's expensive cologne. She put on a cheerful playlist, humming along softly as if she were heading to a party. I sat in the passenger seat, clutching my purse, a small rolling suitcase at my feet with 2 changes of clothes and a pair of slippers. You're going to like it, Mom, she said, her eyes fixed on the road. Mark's mom said the place is wonderful, and you need some time for yourself. Right? Mark's mom. She was worthy of the trip to the beach. I was worthy of a break in a place I'd never heard of. As we drove further out of the city, past the familiar highways and into the winding country roads of North Carolina, a cold dread settled in my stomach. I looked out the window at the passing fields and endless pine trees. Felt like I was being exiled. We pulled up to a long driveway with a sign that read, Sunrise Meadows Assisted Living. It was painted in muted, neutral colors. There were artificial flowers in pots by the entrance and an automatic gate that opened with a slow, grinding noise, as if it knew no one ever entered willingly. She parked the car and turned to me. That strained smile plastered on her face. Her eyes were darting toward her phone, as if every second the screen was off was a moment wasted. She handed me the small suitcase. Your things are in here, Mom. Just the essentials. Then she pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. For neat creases. Her hurried handwriting inside. I'll be back on Sunday. Okay. I'm going to the beach with Mark and his mom. We planned this trip a long time ago. Myrtle Beach. The city I'd only ever seen on TV during New Year's Eve reports. She was going with her new mother-in-law. And me? I was getting a room with a wooden bed, a low pillow, and the faint, lingering smell of expired lavender. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just got out of the car and walked towards the entrance. A friendly staff member greeted me at the reception desk. He called me Mrs. Evans and offered me tea. I accepted it the way a condemned woman accepts her last meal. I sat on the edge of the stiff mattress and looked out the window. The view was a beige brick wall. I tried to understand. I tried to justify it. It's just for a few days, she had said. But something inside me broke. It wasn't sadness. It was shame. A type of shame that wasn't even mine. But I felt it wearing me like a lead coat. I had become an inconvenience. Problem to be solved. A secret to be kept. That night, I lay awake, listening to the tick-tock of a clock in the hallway and the soft snores of the woman in the room next to mine. I remembered when Lucy was little and had a high fever. I stayed up for 3 straight nights, praying at the foot of her bed. I remembered her first real job, the navy blue blazer I'd altered by hand because she couldn't afford a new one. I remembered when she cried over a broken heart, and I was the first one to tell her she deserved more. And now? Now I was the one crying on the inside, with no one to say a word. I stared at the dark ceiling, the beige wall just outside my window. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was deafening. It was the sound of being utterly, completely alone. And in that crushing silence, a new feeling began to stir. It wasn't despair. It was a cold, hard resolve. A tiny ember, long dormant, starting to glow in the dark. She thought this was the end of my story. She had no idea it was the beginning. I woke up the next morning to the smell of disinfectant and lukewarm oatmeal. The sun was trying to break through the gray clouds, casting a weak, watery light onto the beige wall outside my window. For a moment, I felt a familiar wave of resignation wash over me. This was it. This was my new reality. Clean, quiet, polite prison. But then I remembered the feeling from the night before. That small, hard ember of resolve. It was still there. A tiny point of heat in the cold expanse of my chest. I ate my breakfast slowly, methodically. I didn't taste the oatmeal. I didn't notice the other residents sitting silently at their tables, lost in their own worlds. I was thinking, planning. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what Lucy needed, what would make her life easier, what would keep the peace. I was thinking about what I needed. After breakfast, I went back to my room. I opened the small suitcase she had packed for me. Just the essentials, she'd said. A couple of nightgowns, a pair of worn-out slippers, my toothbrush, and a bottle of my daily medication. But tucked into a side pocket, I found the one thing I had insisted on bringing myself, my best blouse. It was a simple silk shirt, a soft cream color. The only piece of clothing I owned that still smelled like my real home. Like the cedar chest in my old apartment. It smelled of a life before I became an accessory to someone else's. I put it on. I brushed my hair until it shone. I even put on a little bit of the lipstick I kept in my purse for special occasions. I looked at myself in the small, cloudy mirror above the dresser. The woman looking back at me was tired. There were lines around her eyes I hadn't noticed before. But there was something else in her gaze, too. A spark. I walked to the reception desk. The same young man from yesterday was there, smiling politely. "Good morning, Mrs. Evans. Can I help you with something?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I was wondering if I might be able to use your computer for a few minutes. I need to check something online." He was happy to oblige. He led me to a small office behind the desk. A cluttered space with a desktop computer humming quietly in the corner. "Take all the time you need," he said with a kind smile. and closed the door behind him. I sat down in the worn office chair. My hands were trembling as I moved the mouse and opened the web browser. I navigated to my bank's website, a site I knew by heart. For years, I had been the one to manage the finances. Lucy was brilliant with marketing slogans and client presentations, but terrible with bills and budgets. Everything was in my name. The mortgage on her house, the utilities, the credit cards I had added her to as an authorized user so she could rebuild her credit after the divorce. I had carried the financial weight, thinking it was my duty, my contribution. I never saw it as leverage. Until now. I typed in my username and password, my fingers stiff and slow. The screen loaded, showing the familiar dashboard, my checking account, my savings, the credit card balances. It was all there. My entire life, reduced to a series of numbers on a screen. I took a deep breath. And then, one by one, I began to dismantle the world I had built for her. First, the main credit card. I found the option, report card lost or stolen. I clicked it. A pop-up asked for confirmation. Are you sure you want to deactivate this card? I clicked yes. A small green check mark appeared. Card deactivated. Next, the additional cards. Lucy's. I navigated to the authorized user settings. It was just as easy. Remove user. Click. Confirm. Click. Another green check mark. She was gone. Then, the joint checking account we had opened for household expenses, the one I funded every month from my pension and the rental income from my apartment. I found the option to transfer the remaining balance to my personal savings account. The number wasn't huge, but it was mine. I transferred every last cent. Click. Confirm. The account now had a balance of 0. Finally, I changed my password. A long, complicated one I had written down on a piece of paper in my wallet. Something she would never guess. It wasn't out of vengeance. It was out of respect. Respect for the woman who had earned that money, who had saved it, who had given it away too freely. It was an act of reclaiming myself. When I was done, I felt a strange sense of calm. The trembling in my hands had stopped. I logged out, closed the browser, and stood up. I walked back to the reception desk and handed the young man a small, folded note I had written in my room. Thank you for everything. It said, you have been very kind, but this is not my place. Sincerely, Helen Evans. He looked at the note, then at me. A flicker of confusion in his eyes. Is everything all right, Mrs. Evans? Everything is perfect, I said, and I meant it. I walked back to my room, packed the small suitcase, and walked out the front door, right past the artificial flowers and the polite smiles. I didn't look back. The automatic gate opened slowly as I approached, and I walked through it, out onto the country road. The gray sky was beginning to break, and a sliver of blue was visible on the horizon. I pulled out my old flip phone and found the number I was looking for. Rose. My friend since childhood. She lived in a small house just a few blocks from the bus station in Charlotte. We didn't talk often, but our friendship was one of those old, sturdy things that didn't need constant maintenance. She answered on the second ring. Helen? Is that you? It's been ages. Rose. I said, my voice clear and strong. I need a favor. Just for tonight. An hour later, a local taxi I'd called dropped me at a small crossroads with a gas station. Another hour after that, I was on a regional bus heading back toward Charlotte. I wasn't going home. I was just passing through. In my purse, I had my wallet, my phone, and a newfound sense of purpose. 3 hours after that, I was sitting in the Greyhound station in Charlotte, the smell of diesel fumes and stale coffee in the air. Rose had met me with a hug and a hot cup of tea. No questions asked. She'd let me rest for an hour before driving me to the station. Now, under the flickering fluorescent lights, I held a one-way ticket in my hand. Destination Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Not to find Lucy, but to find me. Because dignity doesn't retire. And a mother's heart also knows when it's time to walk away. I was already on my way, wearing my best blouse, a new tube of lipstick, and a washed sole. If there's one thing life had taught me, it's that contempt doesn't always scream. Sometimes it comes dressed in silence, in half-finished sentences, in a subtle request for you to please stay in your room today, Mom, just so you don't get in the way. As the bus pulled out of the station and merged onto the highway, I watched the Charlotte skyline shrink in the rearview mirror. I thought about Lucy. I pictured her on the beach, laughing with Mark and his mother. I pictured her reaching for her credit card to pay for a fancy dinner, only to be met with the quiet humiliation of a declined message. Would she be angry? Confused? I didn't know. And for the first time, I didn't care. I settled back into the worn vinyl seat. The bus rumbled south, carrying me away from the life I had known and towards a future I couldn't yet imagine. For 67 years, I had been a mother, a wife, a caregiver, a provider. I had been everything to everyone. Now, it was time to be something for myself. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I watched the colors bleed into the horizon and felt a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. I was no longer an inconvenience. I was a passenger on a journey of my own making. And for the first time in a very long time, I was looking forward to where I was going. The woman in the seat next to me, a young college student with headphones on, glanced over and smiled. First time heading to the beach? She asked, pulling one earbud out. I thought for a moment, then smiled back. No, I said. It's the first time I'm heading to myself. She looked a little puzzled, then nodded and put her earbud back in. I turned my face back to the window. Simple. Lucy had called me. Maybe I was. But as the bus sped down I-77, leaving my old life further and further behind, I realized something important. Simple doesn't mean weak. And invisible? Never again. Getting off the bus at the Myrtle Beach terminal was like stepping out of a shell. The air was thick and salty. A heavy, humid blanket that smelled of the ocean and fried food. The wind whipped my hair around my face. And for the first time, I didn't try to tame it. The cars moved slowly, lazily, as if the entire city had learned not to hurry. Myrtle Beach wasn't expecting me, and yet, it welcomed me with a strange, indifferent kindness. I bought a coffee from a small kiosk inside the station. It was bitter and too hot, but I held the styrofoam cup in my hands like a trophy. I found an empty plastic table outside, set my small suitcase beside me, and just watched. Families with sunburned children laughed as they juggled beach toys and coolers. Teenagers in board shorts and bikinis took selfies, their faces glowing with youth and carelessness. Elegant older women, dressed in crisp white linen and carrying designer bags, strolled by as if they owned the very pavement they walked on. For a moment, a wave of doubt crashed over me. What was I doing here? Alone. At 67. With a bank account I had just torpedoed for my own daughter, and an ache in my chest that still throbbed with a dull, persistent rhythm. I thought about turning around, about catching the next bus back to Charlotte, back to the familiar pain, back to my designated corner of the world. Then, a little boy, no older than 4, ran past my table, chasing a runaway beach ball. He tripped, landed softly on the grass beside the sidewalk, and looked up at me. He smiled. A spontaneous, gap-toothed grin, free of judgment or expectation. And I smiled back. Maybe that was it. Maybe that's all I needed. To be seen without being measured. I hailed a simple taxi, one of the older sedans that smelled faintly of pine air freshener and years of service. The ocean front. Please, I told the driver. Anywhere is fine. I had no hotel reservation, no plan, just a deep, aching desire to see the sea, And when it finally appeared, rising up at the end of a long street, oh, it was beautiful. The water was a vast expanse of shimmering silver, reflecting the afternoon sky like a liquid mirror. The sun, hanging low and golden, seemed to have been painted there just for me. "Here is good," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He pulled over in front of a row of motels, their colorful signs promising ocean views and free HBO. I chose the one that looked the most modest, a 2-story building painted a cheerful, if slightly faded, shade of seafoam green. The Blue Heron Motel. The receptionist was a young woman with a kind face and a name tag that read Bianca. When she saw me, with my single suitcase and my tired eyes, she offered me a room on the 2nd floor with a small balcony and a complimentary breakfast. "Staying for long, ma'am?" she asked as she handed me the key card. I looked at the plastic card in my hand, a key to a room I hadn't known existed an hour ago. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe just long enough to remember who I am." The room was simple, clean, and quiet. It had a soft bed, a wicker rocking chair on the balcony, and a bottle of water on the nightstand. I sat on the edge of the bed, took off my shoes, and felt the cool, tiled floor against the soles of my feet. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like an intruder. I switched on the television but turned it off almost immediately. The noise bothered me. I was used to silence. But now, it was a silence of my own choosing, not one imposed upon me. I took out my small purse mirror and looked at my face. Not with criticism, the way I always did at home, trying to hide the gray hairs or the deep lines around my eyes. I looked at myself with kindness. I saw a woman who was still standing, whole and upright, even after everything. And I thought, she's beautiful. Not in the way magazines tell you to be beautiful, but beautiful because she was finally here. The next morning, I put on a light, simple dress, one of the few I'd brought, and walked down to the beach. My bare feet sank into the soft sand, and the waves rushed in to kiss my ankles, as if to say, "You belong." I stopped at a small wooden shack selling coconut water. The man behind the counter, with a white beard and a wide, friendly smile, struck up a conversation. "All by yourself out here, miss?" he asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I'm with myself," I replied. He let out a hearty laugh. "The best company there is." And for the first time, I agreed without lying. Later, I sat on a bench overlooking the ocean, watching the groups of people, families, friends, lovers. And in that moment, watching them, I realized something profound. The problem wasn't the city, or the beach, or the other people. The problem was the way I had allowed myself to be treated for so long. Always making myself smaller. Always waiting for someone else to tell me, "You are enough." I was enough. I had always been enough. Late in the afternoon, my old flip phone buzzed. A message from Lucy. "Mom, I tried to call. Where are you? The bank blocked everything. I can't use my cards. Please answer me. I'm desperate." I read the message. Then I read it again. Desperate. She was desperate because her access to my money was gone. Not because her mother had vanished from a facility where she had abandoned her. I didn't reply. I deleted the notification and put the phone back in my purse. She wanted to know where I was. Let her ask with sincerity, not out of convenience. That evening, I had dinner alone at a small, family-owned restaurant with red and white checkered tablecloths and instrumental music playing softly in the background. The waiter, a young man with a gentle demeanor, treated me with a calm, unhurried respect, as if I were his most important customer. I ordered a dish I'd never had the courage to try before, shrimp and grits. Felt extravagant, a luxury I didn't deserve. But as the creamy, savory dish was placed in front of me, I knew I did. I took a picture of it. Not to post online, but to remember. To remember that I, too, deserve beautiful things. I walked back to the motel with my hair down, the sea breeze cool on my skin. My heart felt lighter, less constricted. From my balcony, before going to bed, I looked up at the star-filled sky. I thought about the entire life I had lived hidden behind the word mom, as if it were forbidden to be anything more, as if my worth only existed as long as I was serving someone else. But now, it was just me, and even though it hurt, it was liberating. That night, I slept like I hadn't slept in years. Alone. In peace. Without the fear of being a bother. I woke to the phone vibrating insistently on the nightstand. 3 missed calls. 4 new messages. All from Lucy. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. A soft, gentle light was creeping into the room, as if asking for permission. I sat on the edge of the bed, took a deep breath, and looked at the screen. Mom, please answer me. You disappeared. I'm desperate. They blocked my card at the restaurant. I was so embarrassed. Where are you? Call me now. Desperate. Embarrassed. Funny. Wasn't it? The one who had made me disappear like a stain on a tablecloth. The one who had locked me in a place of silence while she smiled for new company. The one who had told me, in no uncertain terms, that I was too simple for her new life. Now she was feeling embarrassed. I got up calmly, picked up my hairbrush, and went to the bathroom mirror. I looked at myself again, this time without fear of seeing the marks of time. Every wrinkle on my face carried a name, a weariness, a sleepless night spent for someone who was not me. I knew how to read the folds of my own history, and in that mirror, for the first time, they didn't hurt me. I went back to the room, sat in the wicker chair on the balcony, and just sat for a while. The ocean was still whispering down below, and in that moment, the memories began to come, one after another, like waves breaking on the shore of my mind. I remembered her, little Lucy, hair stuck to her forehead with sweat from running too hard. I remembered her falling off her bike and screaming my name before she even hit the ground. I remembered the high fever when she slept wrapped in my arms all night. I remembered every single birthday party I threw for her alone, taping up balloons with scotch tape and lighting a cake with crooked candles. I remembered the school projects she presented, proudly saying, "My mom helped me." Yet, I helped. I helped her become everything she is today. Every part of her was built on the bricks I had carried. But I also remembered the silences. The day she got into college and told me in a flat tone, "Mom, you don't need to come with me. I'm going with Marina's dad." The day she renovated the house and said she wasn't going to spend money on my little room right now. Or that one birthday of mine when she showed up late. With no gift, no hug, just a quick, "Oh, sorry." The day was crazy. And I accepted it. Because mothers accept things. But accepting isn't the same as forgetting. It's just storing it away. Sometimes for far too long. I looked back at the phone. I thought about responding. But then another message appeared. "Are you punishing me? What did I ever do to you?" I closed my eyes and held back the tears. Because that was the worst part. When they make you doubt your own pain. When they throw the blame back into your lap like a heavy blanket. Too heavy to question. I stood up, took a long shower, put on a light-colored dress, and went for a walk along the shore. I needed to breathe. As I was walking, I noticed an elderly woman sitting on a bench, her eyes closed, a calm smile on her face. She must have been in her 80s. She wore a colorful scarf and leather sandals. I approached her slowly, and she opened her eyes. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," I replied with a smile. "Are you from around here?" "No, just passing through." She nodded, and then she said something that pierced right through me. "Sometimes, you have to leave the place where everyone sees you as a piece of furniture. It's the only way to remember you still have a voice." A lump formed in my throat. It was as if she knew everything without knowing anything at all. We talked for a few minutes. That woman on the bench and I. Her name was Odette. She was a widow, had lived alone for years, and said that the best company in life was one's own silence. We parted with a handshake, one of those firm, knowing grips that says, "I see you." I walked back to the motel feeling a new kind of strength. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. A sharp, undeniable clarity that cut through decades of fog. Back in my room, I sat on the bed and reread all the messages from my daughter. Some pleaded. Others demanded. One of them said, "How could you have the courage to do this to me?" "Oh, my dear girl," I thought. "I had courage when I slept on the factory breakroom couch so you wouldn't go without milk. I had courage when I went alone to the courthouse to register your birth because no one else wanted to go with me. I had courage when I agreed to live in a back room while you rebuilt your life. All while you told me with your eyes that I should disappear when your guests arrived. What I did now, this wasn't courage. This was survival. I wasn't disappearing out of malice. I was finally, after all this time, existing." I found a small notepad and a pen in the nightstand drawer. The kind motels leave for guests. I opened it to the first page and wrote, "List of things I still want to do." First item, sit on a beach until the sun sets without looking at a clock. Second item, eat something I've never been brave enough to try. Third item, stop apologizing for being who I am. I closed the notepad, took a deep breath, and smiled. The phone vibrated again. This time, I switched it off. I didn't just silence it. I held the power button until the screen went black. 'Cause now, the one who needed an answer wasn't me. That clarity I felt, that sharp new edge, it was what I needed for what came next. After a few days of breathing the sea air, of feeling the sun on my skin, I started to feel a dangerous calm settle in. I started to wonder if I had overreacted. Maybe Lucy was just stressed. Maybe she didn't mean it. The old habit of making excuses for her, of smoothing over the rough edges of her behavior, was creeping back in. I needed to remind myself why I was here. With a deep breath, I turned the phone back on. I told myself I was just checking the weather, but I knew I was lying. I was looking for a sign. A reason to either stand my ground or retreat. The phone buzzed to life, and a string of notifications flooded the screen. I ignored Lucy's messages. But then, the phone began to ring. An unknown number with the local area code. My heart hammered against my ribs. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the ignore button. But something made me answer. "Hello?" I said, my voice thin. "Hello. Am I speaking with Helen Evans?" A professional, cheerful voice asked. "Yes, this is she." "Wonderful. This is Carol from Sunrise Meadows Assisted Living. I'm just calling to follow up on the application your daughter, Lucy, submitted last week. We've received the long-term residency forms, and we're just waiting on the power of attorney paperwork she mentioned she'd have you sign. We'd like to schedule your initial health assessment." The world tilted on its axis. The cheerful voice on the other end of the line faded into a dull roar. Long-term residency forms. Power of attorney. The words echoed in the small, quiet room. This wasn't a few days' rest. This was a plan. A calculated, cold-blooded plan to put me away. To take my name, my decisions, my very life, and sign them over to her. It wasn't just an act of neglect. It was a coup. She had been trying to legally erase me. The shame I had felt on that first day was nothing compared to this. This was a violation. The quiet ember of resolve inside me burst into a cold, white-hot flame. The last shred of doubt, the last wisp of motherly excuse-making, was incinerated. "Mrs. Evans, are you still there?" Carol asked, her cheerfulness unwavering. I found my voice. Came out low and steady, a tone I hadn't used in years. "There has been a mistake," I said. "A grave mistake. I will not be requiring your services. Not now. Not ever. Please remove my name from your records. I ended the call before she could reply. I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone clutched in my hand, my knuckles white. The air in the room was thick, heavy. I wasn't just fighting for my dignity anymore. I was fighting for my freedom. My mind, which had been foggy with hurt and confusion, was now crystal clear. I knew exactly what I had to do. I didn't waste a moment. I found the number for a real estate agency in Charlotte, one of the big ones with billboards all over the city. I called them. My name is Helen Evans. I said to the agent who answered. I own a property in the Plaza Midwood area. I need to sell it. Urgently. And I need it done with absolute discretion. There was a pause on the other end. Urgently and discreetly? Or, Mrs. Evans, we can certainly help with that. Can I ask why the rush? Because, I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel. I've just discovered my home is no longer my own, and I intend to take it back. The next few hours were a blur of phone calls and emails. I scanned and sent documents from the motel's small business center, Bianca helping me without a single question. I signed papers digitally, my hands steady. I was no longer a victim. I was a woman taking action. I was dismantling the life she had tried to steal from me, brick by brick. The finality of it was terrifying and exhilarating. The house in Charlotte was more than just property. It was the last tangible piece of the life I had built. It was filled with memories, good and bad. It was the place Lucy had taken her first steps, the place I had comforted her after her first heartbreak. But it had also become my prison, a place where I was expected to be small, quiet, and out of the way. A house where you have to tiptoe around your own life isn't a home. It's a warehouse. And I was done being stored. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't feel sadness or loss. I felt a profound, almost frightening sense of power. The power of a person with nothing left to lose. I walked down to the beach, the moon hanging full and bright over the dark water. The waves crashed against the shore with a relentless, rhythmic force. I stood at the edge of the water, letting the cold foam wash over my feet. I thought about Lucy's eventual discovery, the phone call from the realtor, the for sale sign that would soon be planted in the front yard of the house she thought was hers. The panic, the outrage. She would see it as a declaration of war. But she was wrong. This wasn't an attack. It was a liberation. My liberation. A new message buzzed on the phone I had forgotten to turn off. It was Lucy. Mom, I'm really starting to worry. This isn't funny anymore. Please just tell me you're okay. I read the words and felt nothing. No anger. No pity. Just a vast, empty distance. She was worried. But she wasn't worried when she drove me to Sunrise Meadows. She wasn't worried when she filled out the forms to have me committed. She was worried now because she was losing control. I looked out at the dark, endless ocean. The tide was coming in, washing away the footprints I had left in the sand. A clean slate. That's what I had been given. And I was going to use it. I finally turned the phone off. For good this time. Let her worry. Let her wonder. Let her feel. For the first time. The deafening silence of an absence she had created herself. A week passed. A week of silence. My phone remained off, tucked away in the nightstand drawer like a relic from a past life. The quiet was a balm. Each day, I woke up not to the jarring sound of an alarm or the passive-aggressive thumping of the washing machine, but to the gentle sound of the ocean and the soft light filtering through my balcony door. My world, which for so long had revolved around Lucy's schedule and needs, now revolved around the rising and setting of the sun. I created a new routine for myself. A simple, quiet one. I'd wake up, make a cup of instant coffee in my room, and sit on the balcony, watching the early morning joggers and dog walkers. Then, I'd walk. I'd walk for miles along the beach, feeling the sand between my toes, collecting seashells. My mind blissfully empty. I found a small, local library a few blocks from the motel. Cozy, welcoming place with the comforting smell of old paper. I spent my afternoons there, reading novels, losing myself in other people's stories so I could forget my own. I was becoming a new person. Or perhaps, I was becoming the person I was always meant to be before life got in the way. I started talking to people. Not just Odette, whom I saw a few more times on her morning walks, but others. I chatted with Bianca at the front desk, learning about her dreams of going to college. I learned the name of the man at the coconut stand. His name was Sal, and we'd talk about the weather and the changing tides. These were small, simple interactions, but they were more meaningful than any conversation I'd had with my own daughter in years. They saw me. Just Helen. Not Lucy's mother. Not an old woman to be managed. Just Helen. One afternoon, the real estate agent from Charlotte called me on the motel's landline. As I had instructed. Mrs. Evans, he said, his voice professional and efficient. We have an offer. A very strong one. All cash. Quick close. They love the neighborhood and want to move in as soon as possible. I closed my eyes, my hand gripping the receiver. This was it. The final cut. Accept it, I said, my voice not wavering. Accept the offer. Excellent. I'll send the paperwork over to your email. You can sign it digitally. Once that's done, we can schedule the closing. Thank you, I said, and hung up. I stood by the window, looking out at the turquoise pool, where a family was laughing and splashing. A house I had lived in for years. A house I had poured my heart and soul into. Was about to be sold with a few clicks of a mouse. I should have felt sad. But I didn't. I felt light. I felt free. That night, I celebrated. I went back to the little Italian restaurant with the checkered tablecloths. I ordered a glass of red wine, something I hadn't done in decades. I savored every sip. The waiter, the same young man as before, smiled at me. Celebrating something special tonight? Yes, I said, raising my glass in a silent toast to myself. A new beginning. 2 days later, the fallout began. The phone in my room rang. It was Bianca from the front desk. Helen, she said, her voice hesitant. There's someone here to see you. A young woman. She says her name is Lucy. She says she's your daughter. My blood ran cold. I had known this moment would come, but I wasn't prepared for the jolt of it. She had found me. She seems very upset, Bianca added quietly. I'm sure she is, I said, my voice a low murmur. I took a deep breath, the calm I had cultivated over the past week settling over me like a shield. Tell her I'll be down in the lobby in 5 minutes. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman who looked back was no longer the frightened, invisible creature who had arrived here. Her eyes were clear. Her posture was straight. I smoothed down my dress, took one last deep breath, and walked out of the room. She was standing in the middle of the small, sunlit lobby, looking utterly out of place. She was wearing a crisp, expensive-looking business dress, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen. She was twisting the strap of her designer handbag in her hands, a nervous gesture I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. When she saw me walking down the stairs, she took a step forward, her mouth opening and closing as if she didn't know what to say. I didn't wait for her to speak. I walked past her, towards the front door. Let's walk, I said, not looking back. She followed me out into the bright afternoon sun. We walked in silence towards the beach, the sound of our footsteps on the pavement the only noise between us. The air was thick with unspoken words, with years of resentment and regret. We stopped at a quiet spot on the boardwalk, overlooking the ocean. The waves crashed rhythmically against the shore. For a long time, Neither of us spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. Her voice choked with tears. A for sale sign. Mom, a sign. That's how I find out. I came home from a business trip, and there was a sign in our yard. Our home. It was never our home. Lucy, I said, my voice calm and even. I kept my eyes on the horizon. It was my home. You just lived in it. How could you? She whispered, her voice cracking. How could you do this to me? To us? I finally turned to face her. I looked directly into her eyes, and for the first time, I didn't see my little girl. I saw a stranger, a woman who had been willing to strip me of my home, my freedom, and my dignity for her own convenience. How could I do this? I repeated her question, my voice dangerously soft. Let's talk about what you did. Lucy, let's talk about Sunrise Meadows. Let's talk about the long-term residency forms. Let's talk about the power of attorney you were so eager for me to sign. The color drained from her face. She looked like she had been slapped. Her mouth open, but no sound came out. She stared at me, her eyes wide with shock and guilt. You weren't just putting me on a break, were you? I continued, the words coming out like cold, smooth stones. You were putting me away. You were going to take everything from me. My home, my money, my ability to make my own decisions. You were going to turn me into a non-person, a problem you could pay someone else to manage. Also, your life could be a little bit simpler. She started to cry then. Not the angry, frustrated tears from her text messages, but deep, racking sobs of shame. No, she whispered. It wasn't like that. Don't lie to me, Lucy, I said, my voice cutting through her sobs. Not anymore. I have spent my entire life accepting your lies, your excuses, your half-truths. I'm done. You didn't just abandon me. You betrayed me. In the cruelest way possible. She sank onto a nearby bench, her head in her hands. I didn't know what else to do. She sobbed. Mark said. He said it would be for the best. That you'd be safer. Cared for. Safer? I let out a short, bitter laugh. You mean out of the way. You mean invisible. You were ashamed of me. Lucy. Ashamed of your simple mother who didn't fit into your new, shiny life with your successful boyfriend. So you decided to throw me away. Like an old piece of furniture. She looked up at me, her face a mess of tears and mascara. I'm sorry, she whispered. Mom, I'm so sorry. I looked at her, at the daughter I had loved more than life itself, and I felt a profound, aching sadness. But it wasn't enough to make me go back. The apology had come too late. The wound was too deep. Sorry isn't enough, I said quietly. It can't unsay the words. It can't undo the forms you filled out. It can't give me back the years I spent making myself small to make you comfortable. I took a step back. The house is being sold. It's done. You will get a portion of the proceeds. More than you deserve. But enough to find a new place to live. After that, we are done. Done? She cried, looking up in horror. What do you mean? Done? I said, the words tasting of salt and freedom, that I am no longer your mother in the way you understood it. I am no longer your safety net, your bank, your maid, or your emotional caretaker. I am Helen. And Helen is starting a new life. Without you in it. I turned and walked away, leaving her sobbing on the bench. Each step I took was heavy, but it was also lighter. I didn't look back. I walked down the boardwalk, towards the sound of the waves, towards the setting sun, towards the rest of my life. The war was over, and I had won. Not by defeating her, but by finally choosing myself. The image of Lucy crying on that bench was burned into my mind. Part of me, the mother part that was woven into my very DNA, wanted to turn back, to wrap my arms around her and tell her it would all be okay. But the new part of me, the part named Helen, kept walking. I knew that okay for her meant going back to the way things were. It meant me shrinking back into my little room next to the laundry, my voice silenced, my presence tolerated. And that was a price I was no longer willing to pay. I walked until the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple. I didn't go back to the motel right away. I found a quiet spot on the sand, away from the tourists and the cheerful lights of the boardwalk. I took off my shoes, dug my toes into the cool, damp sand, and just breathed. The air was salty, clean. It felt like it was washing away the last remnants of the confrontation, the last vestiges of the life I had left behind. She had said she was sorry. I believed her. I believed she was sorry she got caught. I believed she was sorry her comfortable life was being upended. But was she sorry for the act itself? For the cold calculation it took to research facilities, fill out forms, and plan my disposal while smiling to my face? I didn't think so. Her sorrow was born of consequence, not of conscience. And that made all the difference. When I finally returned to the Blue Heron Motel, the lobby was empty. Bianca was at the front desk, tidying up. She looked up as I entered, her expression soft with concern. "Is everything all right, Helen?" she asked quietly. "Yes, dear," I said, managing a small smile. "Everything is finally all right." She nodded, not pressing for details. "Your daughter left this for you," she said, holding out a sealed envelope. My heart sank a little. I took the envelope. It was heavy, made of thick, expensive paper. My name, Mom, was written on the front in Lucy's elegant, looping script. I took it upstairs to my room and set it on the nightstand. I didn't open it. I knew it would be filled with more apologies, more justifications, more pleas. It was a Trojan horse, designed to breach the walls I had so carefully built around myself. I let it sit there, a silent testament to a battle that had already been decided. The next morning, I woke up with a new sense of purpose. The confrontation was over. The ties had been cut. Now, it was time to build. I spent the day not wandering aimlessly, but with a plan. I bought a local newspaper and circled apartment listings. I was looking for something small, something simple, something just for me. I made an appointment to see a small studio apartment a few blocks back from the main tourist strip. It was on the third floor of an older, well-maintained building, with a large window that had a sliver of a view of the ocean. It had hardwood floors, a tiny but functional kitchen, and a closet big enough for my meager wardrobe. It was perfect. The landlady, a kind-faced woman named Mrs. Gable, showed me around. "It's not much," she said, "but the light is good in the mornings." "It's everything," I replied, and I meant it. I filled out the application right there, using the proceeds from the house sale, which had been officially wired to my account that morning as proof of income. The feeling of writing down my own name, of securing my own home without anyone else's approval or assistance, was intoxicating. "I'll take it," I told Mrs. Gable. She smiled, handing me a copy of the lease. "Welcome to the neighborhood, Helen." That evening, I finally opened the letter from Lucy. I sat in the wicker chair on my motel balcony, a cup of chamomile tea in my hand. I slit the envelope open carefully. Inside were several pages, filled with her handwriting. "Mom," it began, "I don't know where to start. I've been sitting in my car for hours, just thinking, replaying our conversation, replaying the last few years. You were right. About everything. I was ashamed. Not of you, but of where I came from. Every time I looked at you, I saw the struggles, the sacrifices. I saw the life I was so desperate to escape. And when Mark came along, with his fancy world and his perfect family, I wanted to fit in so badly that I was willing to cut out the part of me that didn't. I was willing to cut you out. I know saying sorry is meaningless now. I know I broke something that can't be fixed. The thought of you in that place, it wasn't supposed to be permanent. That's what I told myself. I convinced myself it was a resort, a spa for seniors. I lied to myself so effectively that I started to believe it. But when you said those words, long-term residency, power of attorney, I heard them for what they were. I saw myself for who I had become. And it was ugly. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. The house, the money, I understand. It was never mine to begin with. I was a guest who overstayed her welcome and started treating the host like a servant. I have no right to ask anything of you. But I am asking one thing. Please, don't disappear forever. Let me, someday, try to earn back the right to be your daughter. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. The words were better than I expected. There was a glimmer of self-awareness in them, a flicker of genuine remorse. But it didn't change anything. It was a confession made at the gallows. It didn't erase the crime. My new life was waiting for me. It was a blank page. And for the first time, I was the one holding the pen. I spent the next few days buying small things for my new apartment. A new set of sheets. A fluffy new towel. A small, cheerful yellow teapot. Single, beautiful ceramic mug. Each purchase was a small act of rebellion. A declaration of independence. I was building a nest, not for a family, but for a soul. For my soul. On the last day at the Blue Heron Motel, I packed my small suitcase. I left a thank you note and a generous tip for Bianca. As I was checking out, she gave me a warm hug. You look different, Helen, she said. Happier. I am, I said. Thank you for being so kind to me when I needed it most. I walked the few blocks to my new apartment, pulling my small suitcase behind me. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The afternoon sun was streaming through the large window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The apartment was empty, silent, and entirely mine. I walked to the center of the room and stood there for a long moment, just breathing in the smell of old wood and fresh paint. I had done it. I had escaped. I had survived. I put my suitcase down. I opened it and, for the first time with real intention, I began to unpack. I put my clothes in the closet. I placed my new teapot on the small kitchen counter. I set my single ceramic mug next to it. These weren't just things. They were anchors. They were proof that I was here to stay. That night, I slept in my own bed, in my own home. There was no sound of waves, but I could still feel the rhythm of the ocean in my heart. The rhythm of a tide that had turned, decisively and forever. I didn't dream of Lucy. I didn't dream of the past. I dreamed of the morning. Of the sunlight that would fill my empty room. Of the blank page waiting for me to write on it. And I slept soundly, peacefully, under a roof that I had earned all by myself. We think freedom is a grand thing. A spectacle filled with fireworks and applause. But it's not. Real freedom, I was discovering, is quiet. It's choosing what to have for breakfast without asking for permission. It's walking down the street without the fear of being in someone's way. It's walking into a store and knowing you don't have to explain your presence to anyone. The next morning, I was woken by a sparrow chirping on my windowsill. It was a small, gray bird with a sharp beak and a repetitive, insistent song. Felt like it was calling me to life. And so, I went. I put on a light dress, tied my hair up in a loose bun, and walked out into my new neighborhood. There was no longer a sense of urgency in me. No emptiness. Just presence. I went to a newsstand and bought a new notebook. A simple one with a hardcover. And a blue pen. The kind that glides easily across the paper. I wanted to write down the ideas that had been coming to me since I set foot in this city. I sat on a stone bench in a small, Manicured park. Facing the morning sun. I opened the notebook and on the first page, I wrote, things I want to keep. I started a list. Walking in the morning without my phone. Drinking coffee alone. Slowly. To stop explaining myself so much. To allow myself to laugh in peace. To no longer accept emotional crumbs. To keep a distance from anything that diminishes me. To start writing again. Yet, to start writing again. Because there was a time, long ago, before motherhood, before the rush, before the bills, before the world pushed me out of myself, that I used to write. I wrote letters, short poems, little stories, always in secret. I went back to my apartment with that desire blooming in my chest. On my way, I passed a small, unassuming hair salon. A simple sign in the window said, haircut, $30. I walked in on impulse. The woman inside, whose name tag read Carla, greeted me with a smile too big for the small space. What can we do for you today? She asked. A cut. I said. Just a cut. To take off some of the old weight. She understood. She treated me with a gentle respect, asking few questions but looking me in the eye when she did. And when she was finished, she turned me to face the mirror. Look at that, she said. A new woman. I looked at my reflection and agreed. Not because my hair was so different, but because for the first time, what was on the outside matched what was being born on the inside. I walked back to my apartment feeling lighter, both in heart and, quite literally, in head. I had dinner. A simple pasta dish I made for myself. I sat on my small balcony, opened my new notebook, and wrote another page. Today, I was useful. Not because I was asked, but because I wanted to be. Today, I did something for myself, and no one complained. Today, I existed in my own way, and I was respected in silence. That night, I didn't turn on the phone, not even out of curiosity. It had been off for days, and the peace that gave me was a luxury. The world outside could be in collapse, but inside me, for the first time, there was space. Space for me, for my routine, for my new way of living. And sleeping with that certainty was the greatest comfort of my life. The days that followed settled into a gentle rhythm. I spent my mornings writing in my notebook, my afternoons at the library. I had asked the head librarian, a kind woman named Cecilia, if they needed any volunteers. She had lit up. Always. She'd said, we need people to organize books, to read aloud to seniors, even just to help tidy up. So I became a volunteer. I found a quiet joy in the simple tasks. The smell of old books, the rustle of pages, the silent company of fellow readers. It was a purpose I had chosen, a usefulness I had defined for myself. I wasn't serving out of obligation. I was contributing out of desire. One afternoon, Cecilia approached me as I was shelving books. Helen, she said, her voice soft. I'm sorry to intrude, but someone has been calling here for the past 2 days. They're asking if you frequent this space. My heart gave a little lurch, but it was only for a second. They said it was your daughter, Lucy, Cecilia added, watching my face carefully. You don't have to talk to her. I can say you're not here. I took a deep breath. I thought about Lucy, about her desperate search, about her finally tracking me to this small, quiet corner of the world. Her persistence was impressive, I had to admit. But it was the persistence of someone trying to fix a problem, not someone trying to heal a relationship. Tell her, I said to Cecilia, my voice steady, that I am doing well. And tell her that from now on, I only meet in person with people who treat me with respect. Cecilia smiled, a knowing, supportive smile. I'll do just that. That interaction confirmed what I already felt. Absence speaks. And sometimes, it speaks louder than a scream. For so long, Lucy had seen my outbursts of frustration as temporary storms, passing inconveniences. But when the silence lasts, starts to hurt, it forces the other person to listen to themselves. And Lucy, perhaps for the first time, was being forced to listen. That night, out of a morbid curiosity, I decided to turn on the phone. I just wanted to see. Plugged it in, waited for it to charge and boot up. A deluge of notifications flooded the screen. Text messages, voicemails, missed calls. Some were from a number I recognized as Mark's. I deleted those without a thought. I scrolled through the list from Lucy and, purely out of curiosity, I listened to the most recent voicemail. Her voice was trembling. "Mom, I'm worried. You disappeared. The bank says you've blocked everything. And I don't even know where to begin to fix this. Please, just call me. I get it. Okay. I know I messed up. But for the love of God, don't leave me in the dark like this. Tell me where you are. Tell me if you're alive. Tell me you don't hate me." I pressed the button and deleted the audio. Hate. It was never hate. But what she had given me wasn't love either. It was convenience, useful presence, measured affection. And that makes you sick in a different way. I could have responded. I could have eased her suffering with a single line, a short phrase. "I'm fine." But why was it my job to soothe the person who had wounded me and then moved on as if I were disposable? Instead of replying, I went for a walk on the beach. It was a Friday night. The boardwalk was crowded, but I found a quiet spot at the edge of the sand. I took off my shoes and sank my feet into the cool sand. The ocean came in, touched my feet, and receded. Like life, like affections, like people. I felt a sudden urge to dance. Not with my body, but with my soul. That feeling of lightness that only comes when you finally understand that you don't have to prove anything anymore. And in that exact moment, a woman sat down beside me. It was Odette, the same woman I had spoken to weeks ago. "I had a feeling I'd see you here again," she said, her voice calm. "And I had a feeling I wouldn't want to go home again," I replied, without taking my eyes off the sea. She smiled. "So, you've discovered it, then?" "Discovered what?" "That sometimes you have to disappear to find yourself. And then you don't go back. At least, not to the same place. And not in the same role." We sat in silence for a while. A comfortable, understanding silence. Before she got up to leave, she touched my shoulder. "When someone asks for you with desperation," she said, "it's because they've realized they've lost something. But that doesn't always mean they deserve to find it again." I went back to my apartment with that sentence dancing in my head. I took out my notebook and wrote another page. She is looking for me. But not for me. She is looking for what I solved. For what I paid for. For what I silenced. But now, I am just Helen. And this version of me, my daughter, is no longer for sale. I closed the notebook, left the phone off again, and fell asleep to the distant sound of the ocean. It wasn't pain anymore. It was a farewell. A farewell to a life that no longer served me, and to a woman who now knew exactly what she deserved. The phone call that changed everything for a second time came not to my cell, but to the landline in my new apartment. I had it installed for emergencies, a thin tether to the world I mostly kept at a distance. It was the realtor from Charlotte. "Helen," he said, his voice brisk. "It's done. The closing is complete. The deed is filed. The funds have been wired to your account." "And the other matter?" I asked, my heart thumping a slow, heavy rhythm. "Also done. As per your instructions, a certified check for 25% of the net proceeds has been sent to Ms. Lucy Evans at the address she provided. It's a generous settlement, Helen. More than you were legally required to provide." "I know," I said, It wasn't about generosity. It was about finality. It was severance pay. A clean cut, leaving no reason for her to ever claim I had left her with nothing. Thank you for your help. I hung up the phone. I walked over to my small kitchen table and sat down, my hands resting on the smooth wood. It was over. The last tie to my old life, the house, had been officially severed. I logged into my bank account on my laptop. The number that stared back at me was larger than any I had ever seen. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough for rent, for bills, for a life of simple comfort. Enough to be free. I didn't feel powerful. I felt a profound, bone-deep sense of relief. That money wasn't just currency. It was symbolic. It was the proof that I could restart my life without ever having to ask for permission again. I thought about what to do next. For a moment, the old me, the mother, thought about calling Lucy, about making sure she got the check, about offering advice on finding a new place. But Helen stopped her. Helen knew that her work was done. Lucy was a grown woman. It was time for her to learn how to stand on her own 2 feet. Without me as her foundation. A few days later, a letter arrived. It was postmarked from Charlotte. The envelope was plain. A standard business envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It wasn't from Lucy. It was a formal thank you card. The kind you buy in a pack of 10. Inside, in neat, unfamiliar handwriting, it said, "Dear Mrs. Evans, thank you for this. I know you didn't have to. I will use it to find my own way. I hope one day you will let me tell you that I have. Sincerely, Lucy. Sincerely, Lucy. Not love, Lucy. Not even your daughter." It was the signature of a stranger, a business associate, and in its formality, I found a strange kind of peace. She had understood. The old relationship was over. If anything new was to be built, it would have to start from the ground up, from this new, respectful distance. With that final piece of closure, I felt the last of the weight lift from my shoulders. My life in Myrtle Beach began to take on a beautiful, quiet shape. I continued my volunteer work at the library, my afternoons spent in the peaceful company of books and stories. I started writing more, filling my notebook with observations, memories, and small, fictional tales. I found I had a voice, a way with words that I had long forgotten. One day, Cecilia, the librarian, read one of my short stories. "Helen," she said, her eyes wide with surprise. "This is wonderful. It's moving and real. Have you ever thought about joining a writing group?" The idea terrified and thrilled me. The next week, I found myself in a circle of strangers at the local community center, my hands trembling as I read my story aloud. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then, an older man with kind eyes said, "That was beautiful. It felt like you were telling my story." And in that moment, I understood. My pain, my journey, it wasn't just mine. It was the story of so many others who had felt invisible, who had been silenced, who had forgotten their own names. My voice, turned out, could be a voice for them, too. I walked home that evening feeling more alive than I had in my entire life. I was no longer just a mother, a widow, a survivor. I was a writer. I was a friend. I was a volunteer. I was Helen, a woman of many parts, all of them chosen by me. The first night in my fully furnished apartment, I put on some soft jazz music, lit a scented candle, and cooked myself a simple meal of baked fish and roasted vegetables. I sat at my small table for one and I celebrated. I celebrated the silence that didn't weigh me down. I celebrated the light that didn't cast my shadow aside. I celebrated the freedom that required no audience. After dinner, I went out onto my small balcony. The breeze was gentle, the sky already dark, with stars peeking out between the buildings. I closed my eyes for a moment and just listened to my own breath, calm and steady. And there, with my hands resting on the railing and my bare feet on the cool ceramic tile, I knew I had won. Not because I took everything back, but because I had given back to myself what I should never have given away: my time, my value, my space. The next day, I went to a small frame shop down the street. I had them print a single sentence on a beautiful piece of cardstock, and I bought a simple, elegant frame for it. When I got home, I hung it on the wall next to my front door. Anyone who entered, even if it was just me, would see it and remember. It said, "Here lives a woman who no longer apologizes for existing." Because for so long, I was just a functional presence in the lives of others. Today, I am a complete presence in my own life. And that is enough. My name is Helen. I am 67 years old. My story doesn't end here. It begins here. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been made to feel small, know this: your voice matters. Your space is sacred. And it is never, ever too late to find yourself. Sometimes, all it takes is one small act of defiance, one step in a new direction, to reclaim the life that has been waiting for you all along.